Hello all, this is Dr. Kristen, and this recording is for COD's 1551 or 1571 anatomy class. I'm going to give you a very brief and fast-paced review of our lecture on Chapter 1.1 to 1.5, Foundational Concepts. First, in our basic terminology, we have to understand the phrases anatomy and physiology, the name of our class. Anatomy is the science of structures and their relationship. Physiology is the science of the body's functions. So anatomy is structure and physiology is how something works. So the phrase anatomy and physiology means structure reflects function. Many of you in this class are coming into the healthcare field. The true definition of health, according to all major medical textbooks in the world, is the ability to function at 100% mentally, physically, and socially. Health is the ability to function at 100% mentally, physically, and socially. We talked about the 4 leading causes of death in the United States today, which are heart disease, cancer, medical malpractice, and stroke. We also talked about how none of these have early warning signs. Once you have a symptom or a sign, it's already too late. We have the problem. And that's one example of how health is not about our symptoms. It's not about the way we feel. It's about how well we function. We have 6 basic life processes: metabolism, responsiveness, movement, growth, differentiation, and reproduction. Metabolism describes all of the chemical processes that occur in the body, and we can have catabolism, the breakdown of a complex substance, or anabolism, which is the buildup of a simple substance into something more complex. The basic life process of responsiveness is the body's ability to detect and adapt to change. Movement means motion of the whole body down to our cellular level. The basic life process growth can describe an increase in tissues or cells, an increase in their size, or the developmental process. The concept of differentiation as a basic life process is the development of an unspecialized cell to a specialized cell. And the specific precursor cell that does this is called a stem cell. And finally, reproduction could mean forming a new cell or the production of a new individual. We also have 6 levels of structural organization. The first level is the most minute, the chemical level of organization. And this refers to your atoms and DNA. When you put many atoms and DNA together, you will make a cell. Structural organization layer number 2 is the cellular level. Put many cells together and we get a tissue. Many tissues make up the organ level. Many organs together will create a system, and the 11 systems of the body create the final level, the organismal level. Another important term in basic anatomy is the concept of homeostasis, and in one word you could describe homeostasis as balance. Homeostasis is the balance in the body's internal environment due to the constant interaction of the body's regulatory processes. Homeostasis is dynamic, constantly changing, and it's critical to our health and function. Homeostasis is affected by both external and internal factors. Examples of external factors could include the exterior temperature, an injury, or a lack of oxygen. An internal factor affecting homeostasis could be our nutrition, what we put in our body, water, and emotional stressors. One of the simplest explanations of the concept of homeostasis is walking outside in the summer in Chicago, and it's very, very hot out. The receptors in your skin sense that the temperature has been turned up, so they send a message up to the brain. The brain then evaluates that and does decide that, yes, it is too hot and I need to cool this body down. So the brain then sends a message back out to our sweat glands to initiate sweating, which is a natural cooling mechanism in the body. That entire process that I just described as an example of homeostasis is called a feedback loop. Feedback loops are the cycle of events that monitors, evaluates, and changes, and then repeats. The feedback loop has three components. We have the receptor, which is the structure that monitors the condition. So in that example of temperature, the receptor was the skin receptors sensing an increase in heat. When the receptor does get incoming information, it sends it up to the brain. The brain is the control center. The brain actually evaluates input, it decides the values, and will initiate a change. Now, when the receptor sends a message into the control center of the brain, that's called incoming information, and it travels on an afferent pathway. Then, once the brain does decide what change is required, it will send a message out to the effector. The effector is the structure that receives the output from the brain, and it produces the response to change the condition. So in our example, the brain sent the outgoing message to the sweat glands to initiate sweating to cool the body. So sweat glands are the effector. When the brain or control center sends an outgoing message, it will travel along the efferent pathway. Now, feedback loops can be negative or positive. A negative feedback loop is when you've reversed the change in condition. So for example, let's say you go outside for a run. You're exercising, so your heart rate and your blood pressure increase. The receptors in the heart and vessels sense that there's an increase and send that message up an afferent pathway into the brain, the control center. The brain evaluates that and does agree that, yes, these ranges have increased, so I need to lower them back down to maintain balance and homeostasis. And then the brain will send a message through the efferent outgoing pathway to the effector. In this case, that's the heart. So the brain tells the heart, I need you to decrease the blood pressure, decrease the heart rate, lower it back down to where it is balanced. So that's a negative feedback loop. We've reversed the change. It got too high and we told it to back down. Negative feedback loops are by far the most common, and positive feedback loops are more rare. A positive feedback loop reinforces the change in condition. And a great example of this is a normal childbirth. During the birthing process, the uterus has contractions in an effort to expel the fetus. So the receptors in the uterus are sending messages to the control center that says, we have contractions, we're ready to push this fetus out. The brain evaluates that and it decides it wants to reinforce that change, and it sends the message back to the uterus for more contractions. So in this case, we've increased or promoted the change. We already had contractions and we want more of them, and that's an example of a positive feedback loop. Now, switching gears a little bit, we have some other terminology to cover. First is anatomical position. Anatomical position is standing straight with your palms facing forward down at your sides. The importance of one standardized anatomical position is so that everyone in the health field can have consistent communication. We have 5 anatomical regions. The cephalic region describes the skull and face. The neck describes the cervical spine. The upper limb describes the shoulder, underarm, arm, elbow, forearm, wrist, and hand. Now, do keep in mind that when you say the word arm, you're only referring to the space between the shoulder and the elbow. Forearm is between the elbow and the wrist. We also have the trunk, which describes the chest, abdomen, and pelvis. And our 5th anatomical region is the lower limb, which describes the buttock, thigh, knee, leg, ankle, and foot. Much like we just discussed, using the word leg only represents between the knee and ankle. In our body positions, we can have supine or prone. Supine is when your patient is lying face up and prone is face down. And you will remember supine because it actually has the word up in it. We can also have anterior and posterior. Anterior is the front side, posterior is the back. We can also use the words ventral for front and dorsal for back. We have a number of directional terms. Directional terms are always relative to the midline of the body. Superior and inferior describe above and below. For example, we could say that the cephalic region is superior to the trunk. When we talk about the extremities, arms and legs, we use distal and proximal. Distal meaning further away from, and proximal meaning closer to. So for example, my shoulder is proximal to the elbow. So shoulder is closer to the midline than the elbow. We also have medial and lateral, which describe closer or further from midline. Medial meaning closer, lateral meaning farther. So in one example, I could say my shoulder is lateral to my breastbone. We also have 5 different anatomical planes. And the importance of a plane is that we use it to make a cross section so we can see inside of something. Just like we talk about everything in the patient's anatomical position, when we talk about planes, we want to have some standardized language to do so. So if I take a cross section horizontally between a waist, that creates a top half and a bottom half, and that plane would be a transverse plane. We can also have a mid-sagittal plane. The mid-sagittal plane would be a cross-section cut vertically, creating a left half and a right half. We can also have a parasagittal plane, which is similar to the mid-sagittal, but it is not along the midline. So for example, if I wanted to take a cross-section of a shoulder, so I did a vertical plane through my shoulder, creating a very large half on one side and a small section on the other side, that would be a parasagittal plane. We can also make a frontal plane, which would make a front and back half, and an oblique plane, which is a 45-degree slice. We have different body cavities as well. We first have the cranial cavity, which is formed by our cranial bones and contains the brain. Just inferior to that, we have the vertebral cavity, which is formed by the vertebral column and contains our spinal cord. Anteriorly, we have the thoracic cavity, the chest, which contains 3 subcavities. We have the pleural cavity, which surrounds each lung. We have the pericardial cavity, which just surrounds the heart. And then we have the mediastinum. The mediastinum is the central part between the 2 lungs. It includes the esophagus, trachea, the thymus, and the heart, even though the heart is not a midline structure. 2/3 of it sit to the left. We also have an abdominal cavity, which contains the stomach, spleen, gallbladder, small intestine, part of the large intestine. We also have a pelvic cavity, which contains part of the large intestine, bladder, and reproductive organs. But we often just combine those 2 cavities and say the abdominopelvic cavity. Now, in our first lecture on foundational concepts, we also talked about the 11 systems of the body. In the 1551 and 1571 anatomy, you're going to talk a lot about the anatomy, the structure, bones, muscles, tissues, and joints. In the second class, the 1552 or 1572, you're going to learn a little bit more about physiology, and you're going to talk extensively about the organ systems. We have 11, and I wanted to give you just a very brief overview of each. First is the nervous system, which is the master control of the entire body. It contains the brain, spinal cord, spinal nerves, and the special sense organs like the eyes and ears. The body has 45 miles of nerves. It takes up only 2% of our body weight, but uses 20% of our oxygen. Its function is to detect changes in the environment, interpret the change, and respond with instructions. And what exactly that sounds like is a feedback loop. We also have the muscular system, which is comprised of skeletal muscle and tendons. Its main functions are to maintain posture, move the body, and produce heat. Did you know that the tongue is the only muscle in the body that's attached at one end? The lymphatic system is primarily located at the neck and underarm, but we actually have over 100 lymph nodes throughout the body. The lymphatic system includes the lymph nodes, lymph fluid, spleen, thymus, tonsils, and immune cells. The function of the lymphatic system is to move fluid around the body. It is also the site of maturation for our immune cells, and it carries fats from the gastrointestinal tract to the blood. The respiratory system is comprised of the lungs and their bronchial tree, the pharynx, larynx, and trachea. The respiratory system's function is to produce sound, to bring in oxygen and eliminate carbon dioxide, which is a waste product, and to help regulate our body fluids. The right lung is smaller than our left due to the space required for the liver. Then we have the integumentary system. It's primarily comprised of skin, which is the body's largest organ and takes up 16% of our total body weight. In the integumentary system, we also have hair, nails, sweat glands, and oil glands. The main function of the integument is protection from the outside. It helps regulate our body temperature, eliminate waste, and the skin helps make vitamin D. In our skeletal system, we have 206 bones in the human body. Did you know that human bone is as strong as granite in regards to supporting weight? A block of bone the size of a matchbox can support 9 tons of weight, which is 4 times as much as concrete can support. The skeletal system is comprised of our bones and joints. Its function is to support and protect the body. Bones are the site of muscle attachment, and bones actually store cells, lipids, and minerals inside. The digestive system is the entire tract beginning at the mouth with chewing and ending at the anus with the removal of waste. The function of the digestive system is to break down our food, absorb the nutrients, and eliminate the waste. The most current research on the importance of the digestive system tells us that the digestive system controls 20% of our thyroid function, and it houses 80% of the immune system. So this is actually a very important and wide-reaching system. We also have the reproductive system. The components vary by gender, and their primary function is to create a new organism as well as produce hormones. Did you know that the reproductive system produces both the largest cell in the body, which is a female egg, and the smallest cell in the body, sperm? The urinary system includes 2 kidneys, 1 bladder, 2 ureters, and 1 urethra. Function of the urinary system is to produce, store, and eliminate urine. The urinary system also helps maintain our body fluid balance. The endocrine system. When you hear endocrine system, think hormones, and we have 30 different hormones in the body total. Endocrine system contains the pancreas, thyroid gland, adrenal glands, pineal glands, ovaries and testes, and others. The primary function is to release hormones that regulate the body's activities. And finally, the cardiovascular system. It's comprised of the heart, blood, and blood vessels. Their function is to pump blood throughout the body so oxygen and nutrients can reach their destination. The cardiovascular system also helps repair damaged tissue. Did you know that human blood travels 60,000 miles per day on its journey throughout the body? I hope you found this review to be very helpful of Chapter 1.1 to 1.5 Foundational Concepts. During class, we also went over the anterior and posterior body landmarks as well. Thanks for listening, everybody.